Greetings, citizens! My name is FailureToReport, and today we're going to be talking about game development. So, if you are out of the loop or unaware, a few days ago Newsweek published an article titled Star Citizen director Chris Roberts reveals how he would fix Anthem. I'll make sure to include a link for that masterpiece in this video's description because it's a great read if you ever need a quick laugh. But to summarize it, Chris talks about his time playing Anthem for a few sentences here and there, and the rest of the article is very clearly talking about Star Citizen's development. Now, as I am tempted to make a video dogging Chris over that article, because God help me, he made it so easy, I decided I'll do something positive instead. So today's video is Star Citizen backer FailureToReport reveals how he would improve Star Citizen with minimal effort from the studio. You see, despite what a lot of fanatical followers of Roberts might believe, I'm actually quite patient and understanding. I get that major improvements that would require a lot of effort from CIG just aren't feasible to expect anytime soon. So the aim of this video is to point out some very basic changes CIG could make with minimum effort to greatly improve the quality of life in the verse. So with all that said, let's go ahead and kick this baby down the stairs and get her rolling. Item 1. Ladders. In the history of Star Citizen, I don't know if there has ever been any single aspect that has been as infuriating to the player base as ladders. Whether you're a hardcore Refundian hate sub player or a fanatical CIG stroker, one thing universally agreed upon by all backers is that ladders are the cancer of Star Citizen. Ask a Valkyrie driver about the horrors of war, and instead of hearing a daunting tale of inserting troops into a combat zone or trying to clear out under fire, you're probably going to hear a rage-fueled rant about how they can't go up and down their ship because the ladder has the gravitational pull of a supermassive black hole that will suck you in and constantly snap you into the ladder climb animation even though you are on the opposite side of yellow from the ship. As bad as the ladders can be inside ships, the ones on the outside are almost just as bad. Almost. You see, with their tendencies to impale their owners should they ever drop their guard to the perils of entering their own ship, because Star Citizen snaps players into ship entry animations. It's kind of become a meme when a player's character snaps to the ladder's animation location as the ladder is still coming down, only to be skewered by the vessel that they were supposed to be entrusting their lives to. The thing is, both of these issues could be easily fixed if they were given the same treatment that doors were a few patches back. Make them an interacted item instead of an auto-cling object. It should take the crackshot team over at Cloud Imperium little time to change how ladders are interacted with, from automatically sucking in any unsuspecting passerby to requiring the player to walk up to the ladder and intentionally consenting to the interaction. Item 2. Port Olisar griefing. Now, I'll be the first to out myself as having earned my Rammerhead pilot wings, and while my personal use of ramming people on the pads of Olisar is usually restricted to eye for an eye type ramming, the fact is that Olisar is a cesspool of players ramming others, and it only got worse when CIG switched ships over to needing to ramp up on their power and shield times. Since it seems that CIG can't figure out how to code a player armistice zone separate from the station turrets and security being able to inflict damage, players who want to grief in Olisar are left unchecked until someone can find a bigger hammer to ram them back, which also requires being able to get into your ship in the first place, which any active griefer isn't going to let you do. The Olisar griefing could also easily be deterred by switching the services back to the way they used to be, and that someone who gets a crime stat is barred from using Olisar. Now that we also have additional main ports like Levski, Lorville, and ArcCorp, CIG could additionally deny services to any of these lawful ports as well. Being forced to operate out of Grim Hex limits the size of vehicles griefers can pull due to Hex not having large pads, which also means longer quantum traveling times getting around the verse. As someone who plays Star Citizen where anyone I don't know is usually kill on sight, I can plainly say I feel zero consequence in Star Citizen right now for venting anyone I feel like killing. While the crime and punishment system is still being worked on, that's also the same line CIG was telling us 4 years ago too. And while there are certain backers that can literally make my day when they have their meltdown in local chat for getting killed by a player, I can also sympathize with the guys who are losing cargo or ship loadouts that they might have spent hours working for because some PvP player was bored. I'm not saying PvP players or pirates, as some of the RP guys want to call seal clubbing, shouldn't be able to kill who they want, but as someone who has spent many patches living that way in the verse, we really have no consequences for our actions. Item 3, and this one's a bit of a two-parter that I could probably make into 2 items, but since they are so closely related, we're going to try to squish them together. Grouping and trading. In my most recent stream, we did an open call for anyone in the channel Discord who wanted to jump on and try to steal all the drugs out of the Twitch Mission Drug Lab. The hope was that we would be able to get a small force together, hold down the lab, and get some PvP out of it. Sadly, just trying to organize a handful of people into one group if they weren't already friends was a nightmare because of how miserable the friends list system is in Star Citizen. This isn't helped by the fact that Star Citizen backers have 2 separate names, their Spectrum handle and their in-game handle. While this is a lot less of a headache for people like me who have a unified name across both, I've lost count of the time somebody is asked to play with me, but they give me the wrong handle name because they think their Spectrum name is their in-game name. And this system is actually only made even more frustrating with the consensual grouping system Star Citizen uses, in that both parties have to add one another to show up on the friends list. As someone who is probably one of the most hated content creators playing the game, the idea of instant sniping because of a friends list should not at all be a defense of this crap friend system. Since, as backers constantly point out, there's going to be thousands of us in an open universe. So, saying for a minute I believe we will ever get player caps that high and not instanced to the hell and back the way it is now, it shouldn't matter then if somebody is my friend or not if they want to hunt me down and kill me anyways, right? So let's just rip the band-aid off. Because letting a player simply add someone to their friends list to be able to send a party invite would make assembling groups immensely faster. Especially given that the current system more often than not requires adding somebody to your friends list and then backing all the way out of the game in order to refresh the friends list, even if you do both add each other. The second part of this plays into group play, but could also be applied to a broader sense, but for the sake of the same bullet point, we'll just talk about it as if it only pertains to group play for right now. In Star Citizen, we already have the means to transfer credits to other players by creating service beacons. This is a terribly clunky method for transferring money to your friends or paying group mates because it's a publicly broadcasted service beacon that anybody can accept. If Star Citizen has the backend to create fund transfers with beacons as well as face over IP FAP calling specific players, I find it incredibly hard to believe that they can enable a system of just direct transferring credits to a player. This would allow one player to pick up personal missions, do them with a crew or friends, and then pay out directly to those players afterwards instead of having to do a convoluted beacon payout workaround. And while Star Citizen community has been asking for this feature for a long time now, the most CIG has talked about was adding in a system of letting one player accept a personal mission and then sharing that mission with others. While this would rectify the mission grinding, simply allowing payments would cover things like cargo hauling, joint mining operations, divvying out plunder rewards, or just giving a stimulus payment to a friend who is new to the game and having a rough start, which the shared mission system simply doesn't cover. Item 4. Fixing the look behind cameras. So here's a feature that many players probably don't even know exists, but let's talk about it anyways because it does have some major quality of life implications if it was used right. And if you didn't know it existed, just learning about it might help you out in some other situations. So you see, in Star Citizen, if you haven't totally wiped the slate on the default key bindings, the Z key can be pressed to toggle mouse look mode, which allows you to look around your cockpit, and this is incredibly useful in some ships for terrain referencing when you're trying to land, because in the real world, planes are landing on runways, and they have actual instruments as well as a fixed and hopefully cleared runway to land on. These things mean that if you are flying something with a restricted cockpit view, you're able to land without seeing the runway. In Star Citizen, the best case scenario is that you're landing at a starport that has a small indicator to denote which pad you're supposed to land on, and then you can do the cheesy workaround way of going into the auto land system once you're inside the landing pad's designated zone. The problem with the auto land system and getting dependent on it is that any citizen should be able to admit that the majority of the landings they are going to be doing are not at spaceports. There are countless missions that require landing at an obscure outpost, or you're landing in the middle of nowhere to go sightseeing, or further down the line you could be inserting troops or equipment away from a base in order to move in on the objective itself. So while I love the fact that you can find yourself landing in constantly new conditions in Star Citizen, The problem is that the terrain on planets is proc-gen. It's entirely possible to pick out a clean landing site from altitude, only to skewer your hull with rock formations that popped up as you were touching down, or outpost objects you can't see until you're on top of them. The point is that there are many hazards in landing outside of spaceports in Star Citizen, and the only counter to those hazards is unfortunately using the external camera. Enter the look behind camera. So, where tapping Z by default enables mouse look as a toggle, you can also hold down Z, and that will put you into the look behind camera. Neat, right? The issue is that in many ships this camera is totally screwed and looks behind into your cargo hold or some other random part of your ship. The functionality is there on every ship, but the bulk of them need to be properly adjusted so that you can actually see something. Sometimes I kind of wonder if CIG might have just forgotten that this camera angle was even a thing. So, where not every ship has a nicely done look behind camera like the Starfarer, since many of them are currently useless, CIG could spend a few days going through ships and not only fixing the position of this camera, but if the camera position was to be put under the nose so that it showed the landing gear and area under the ship, it would instantly be usable as a landing camera in areas that are not equipped with a proper landing zone and, by extension, auto land. The point is, by simply readjusting how this camera is positioned, and the option to use it is already there in game, you instantly have a workaround to the difficulty of landing in Star Citizen without having to go into an external camera. And since everybody's really big about Star Citizen being a simulator and all about immersion, this seems like a no-brainer fix to me. Item number 5. This one's going to be a lot quicker than the last one because it's honestly such a simple issue, but it's become a major subject that I see every time I get into the persistent universe and have local chat turned on. Bring back the repairing and refueling drones that used to be present at CryAstro. Currently in Star Citizen 3.5, repairing and refueling can take a while to complete after you dock and order services. I can't count how many times I've seen people say, "I keep trying to repair but nothing is happening." Hey, I get it, I've been there myself. The issue is that the repair and rearm services now can take a while, and the heads-up display doesn't really reflect that you're being serviced at all. So while you're getting refueled, you might not even know that it's working until you power off and power back on to see that your tank is topped up and your torpedoes are back. Re-adding the service drones would give players a visual indication that yes, they are indeed receiving these services that they paid for, and know that it is still in progress until those drones depart as they used to. Simple, quick fix, boom. Item 6, Outposts. One of the coolest things in Star Citizen are the outposts on the various planet and moon surfaces. One of the most depressing things about Star Citizen is that these outposts are basically just tourist sites or mission funnels. Should you dare to land at an outpost landing pad instead of off to the side of the outpost, you might as well go looking for a Winston volleyball because you are properly marooned unless someone wants to come rescue you. And even then, your ship is gone. If you had cargo, it's gone. If you had expensive components on that ship, those are gone too, because the only way you can get that ship, the outpost stored back, is to file an insurance claim, once you're back at a spaceport. Players have been asking CIG to allow us to summon our ships from these outposts since planets were introduced in 3.0. And the only excuse I have ever seen from CIG was some standard stupid Chris logic of, well, how would they be summoning those ships? There aren't any hangars that those ships would be stored in, so it wouldn't be immersive. Guess what, retard? It isn't immersive and realistic that my ship magically vanished into a Pokeball the station then stores either. So, I'll leave this one to you, CIG. You should either disable storing of ships at outposts, period. The fact that everyone visiting a planetary outpost lands scattered around the buildings and not on the landing pads should probably tell you that you've implemented outpost landing pads poorly. But instead you double down on it with some "it wouldn't be realistic" excuse. Now, disabling storing is likely the easier fix to the outpost problem, but in this scenario, I would actually hope that CIG would go the harder route. Allow us to summon landing pad appropriate ships from the outpost with a terminal. If you really want to score cool as hell points, let players respawn or log in at those bunk beds on the planet outpost. I would much rather log in at one of those scenic outposts on Hurston or Daymar than the Cancer of Olisar or the tram and elevator runs of the major spaceports. And granted, in theory, you could just find a remote, nice-looking spot to log off in your ship's bed, but sadly, Star Citizen's level of persistence is basically non-existent. I have bedlogged on my ships on some of the most barren moons in the middle of nowhere just to try to log back in a few hours later, and I always wake up in a hab bed at my last spaceport. So it isn't like some random player is finding my ship every single time. Star Citizen just has crap persistence, and as much as I would like to make that an item on this list, that's very clearly a long-term issue for CIG, because at nearly 8 years in development and having this kind of persistence in an MMO, if it was something that they could have done, they probably would have done so by now. So with that in mind, please let us make better use of the outposts and the work that's been put into these environments, because they are pretty cool, but they're basically just eye candy. Number 7! I really hope Cloud Imperium doesn't give up on this game. That they just get their heads down, roll out and improve things to make it work. There. In case you were wondering, that was all the advice Chris gave on how he would fix Anthem in the article. I saved you having to click that garbage Newsweek article that is clearly part of the new Cloud Imperium marketing push. That was all the wisdom Chris Roberts, the man of, and I quote, 3 decades of games industry experience and passion, could offer on how to fix Anthem despite his, quote, influential auteur status. So now he has 3 decades of industry experience despite the fact that the last game he managed to get off the ground without it either still endlessly pending a release date or having it taken away from him and then finished was in 2000. Hey Newsweek, how much would it cost for me to get you to run an article calling somebody the most influential YouTuber of the decade? I'm kind of curious, asking for a friend. Hit me back, okay? I know. All right. I said I wasn't going to dog Chris over this interview, but come the hell on. He couldn't offer a single thing he would have done to improve Anthem, and he says he's been playing it. I could bang off 6 really lazy fixes that would easily improve his game, and that's without consideration of serious developer effort. Hell, if time and resources weren't an issue, I could make a laundry list of things he could do to improve his game. Instead, he spends the whole article talking about how the publishers are bad, even though the Kotaku article very clearly showed that the mismanagement was what tanked Anthem. He also finds some time to blame players for overhyping No Man's Sky to the point that it was doomed even though they only had 13 people making the game. So he's so full of his ego that he doesn't even realize you could post his entire interview into a Word document and then replace No Man's Sky or Anthem with Star Citizen, and he would literally be talking about his own development. Good frickin' lord. Anyways, Citizen, I am FailureToReport, and this has been a quick thing CIG could do to add some quality of life on the cheap. I hope you find it entertaining or thought-provoking, preferably thought-provoking, and as always, you stay safe out there, and I will see you out in the verse.